Recently, I tested out the new Yongnuo 85mm f1.8, and this budget glass is priced at a very, very modest £265 or $359, and it's proved itself through our testing to be surprisingly good. Now, one of my other favourite budget portrait lenses has to be the Viltrox 85mm f1.8 STM II, which we've tested a few times here on the channel, and this lens is also very well priced, coming in at £336 or $399. So the question is, which of these cheap Chinese lenses is the best? Well, today we're going to find out just that in a head-to-head competition that I'm going to call Battle of the Budget! As always, let's start this test by looking at what these lenses are made of, starting with the cheaper Yongnuo 85mm. The Yongnuo 85mm f1.8 is priced at £265 or $359, as I've already said, and it's noticeably smaller and lighter weight than the Viltrox, weighing just 346 grams or 12.2 ounces. Now, I imagine the main reason for it being so lightweight and for its lower price tag is down to its predominantly plastic build. Though on the plus side, it does have some rather nice little embellishments, including a rubberized focus ring that actually rotates really smoothly, and when you switch this thing over to manual focus, it's nice and responsive too. The lens mount is also made from solid metal rather than a hard plastic, which can sometimes be the case with other cheaper budget lenses. They've even gone to the effort of including a metal filter thread on the front of this lens, which is also a very nice touch. On the side of the lens barrel, there's an MF to AF switch, and also a focus hold button that can be customized to act as a shortcut to a host of other camera functions. The addition of this customizable button in particular is a nice addition, as this type of thing is not normally seen on cheaper lenses. It's usually kind of reserved for higher end lenses. I mean, hell, even some expensive lenses don't have customizable buttons on the lens barrel, so I've got to give credit to Yongnuo here for going the extra mile and including this really nice feature. Okay, over to the Viltrox now, and as I've already mentioned, in the UK you can pick this lens up on Amazon for £336 or $399 in the US. The thing that makes this Viltrox stand out from the other budget lenses is the fact that it's constructed almost entirely from metal. All of the outer casing is metal, as well as the lens mount, which makes it feel really super solid in the hand. This lens is actually still relatively lightweight, coming in at 484 grams or 17 ounces. Unlike its cheaper rival, Viltrox have opted to keep the lens body design pretty minimalist, to say the least. There aren't any manual switches anywhere on this lens, so no MF to AF switch or customizable buttons on this thing, which is a slight shame. However, it does have a really nice large focusing ring that operates smoothly, though in comparison to the Yongnuo, it does feel quite heavy to rotate. So if you're a videographer who likes to film long or fast focus pulls, then this lens is probably not for you. Somewhat unsurprisingly, this ring is also made from a textured metal. Despite both of these lenses costing less than $400, I would say that both of these are pretty impressive when it comes to build quality, and they both have their own unique advantages. The Viltrox, for example, is clearly the most robustly built of the two, as it's entirely made from metal, though the Yongnuo is much more compact and offers some manual shortcuts on its lens barrel. So let's head over to the lens chart now and see how both of these lenses handle when it comes to image quality, starting again with the Yongnuo. Looking at this unprocessed raw image that has been shot wide open at f1.8, we can see immediately that this lens suffers from some quite severe pincushion distortion at the edges of the frame. The corners are noticeably darker too due to some vignetting, but both of these issues can be cleaned up quite quickly in Lightroom or Photoshop if this type of thing bothers you. Zoom into the center and the results aren't bad at all. This lens offers a pretty sharp image with no noticeable chromatic aberration. At the corners, the sharpness starts to drop off a little bit and we can see some evidence of fringing starting to appear, but overall, it's really not a bad performance for such a cheap lens. When shooting at the Yongnuo's minimum focusing distance of 0.8 meters or 2.63 feet, we can see that the sharpness is still pretty good, though you can now see a very subtle amount of blue fringing starting to appear. Okay, switching over to the Viltrox now, and you can see immediately that this lens also suffers from some fairly significant pincushion distortion, and it appears to be slightly worse than the Yongnuo. Just like its rival, the corners are a little bit dark, which is an indication that there's some vignetting going on, but again, with a little TLC in Lightroom or Photoshop, these kinds of issues are fairly quick and easy to fix. Zooming into the center, and the sharpness is pretty good. It's definitely much sharper than the Yongnuo. There is a very small touch of fringing present around the edges of the circles, but nothing horrific. Moving over to the edges and things start to soften slightly, there are also some signs of fringing, though these results are pretty much on par with the Yongnuo. The Viltrox has an identical minimum focusing distance as the Yongnuo of 0.8 meters, and when shooting at this distance, I'm pleased to say that the results are still very nice and sharp. Oddly, the fringing issue for this lens doesn't seem to be quite as noticeable when focusing up close, which I guess is a good thing. So far, these lenses are pretty closely matched. Both lenses are much sharper than you would expect budget glass to be, which is really good to see. The Viltrox is certainly the sharper of the two options at the center, but that does not mean that we can rule out the Yongnuo just yet. Let's take into consideration the fact that it had less distortion going on at the edges, and it also didn't have any signs of fringing at the center, unlike the Viltrox, so it's kind of a tough one to call at this point. So sticking with the topic of image quality, let's see how both of these lenses fare when shooting out in the real world. Cue the provocative B-roll! I actually had a lot of fun shooting with both of these lenses, and neither of them gave me any noticeable problems while shooting. I was fully expecting them to be a bit of a nightmare to use, as some budget glass is, but I was pleasantly surprised. When mounted to my Sony a7 Mark III, both lenses felt very nicely balanced and not at all front heavy, which was really nice. The Yongnuo in particular was so small and lightweight that you kind of forget it's even attached to your camera, which is kind of weird for me considering that I'm used to handling very chunky, heavy primes on a day-to-day basis. When shooting wide open with a focal length of 85mm, you're obviously going to get a lovely amount of fall off in your images, even when shooting full-length portraits. When comparing the images side by side, you can clearly see that the Viltrox is the sharper of the two lenses, which backs up the previous lens chart results. Throughout the shoot, both lenses were able to keep locked onto Amber's face with absolutely no issues at all once I'd activated face detection and IAF on my Sony a7 Mark III. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing, as when I later inspected my images in Lightroom, I did notice that a number of the images I took whilst using the Yongnuo were ever so slightly front focused, meaning that even when my camera was telling me that I had locked focus onto Amber's eyes, the resulting image was actually focused just on the tip of her eyelashes or on her cheek. This was also the same problem when shooting full-length portraits too, as you can see in this image here where Amber's shoulder is the sharpest point in the shot, despite the camera locking onto her face. The Viltrox on the other hand provided much more consistent results, and I won't lie, not every single shot was bang on in focus, but the vast majority of the images were tack sharp. The good news is though that neither of these lenses suffer from any obvious colour cast issues, and they both create natural looking skin tones. The Viltrox produced ever so slightly warmer images when compared side by side to the Yongnuo, but it really wasn't anything to be concerned about. In our bokeh balls test, the Yongnuo performed pretty well, offering nice round orbs at the centre, though these did slowly start to morph into a cat's eye shape as they neared the edges of the frame. The Viltrox also offered nice round orbs in the middle, however, as the balls neared the edges of the frame, they did remain fairly round, only flattening out slightly, so overall a much better result from the Viltrox in this round. Going back to the topic of autofocus for a minute, once I deactivated face detection and IAF, I'm pleased to say that both lenses are able to focus quickly and accurately in good lighting conditions, with neither option showing any signs of hunting. If I was being picky, I would have to say that the Yongnuo is the quicker of the two, but only by a few fractions of a second. In low light, the lenses are just as fast to focus, though when using the Yongnuo, I did notice that the reticle would take slightly longer to light up green to confirm that the focus was locked on, but not enough to become an issue. The Viltrox, on the other hand, showed no noticeable change in performance. Switching over to video mode, and I'm pleased to say that both lenses were able to track a moving subject approaching the camera when shooting wide open at f1.8 without any issues at all. The performance was the same when the subject was moving at a faster pace too. As for AF noise, both of these lenses use a stepping motor, which means that they both focus nice and quietly. Though if I was being really picky again, I would have to say that the Yongnuo is the quieter of the two. The Viltrox sounds like a laser gun going off for some weird reason. Okay, so now we've finished all of the rounds of testing, it's time to pick a winner. As always, we're going to determine that by going through each of the tests and awarding a point to the winner in each round. At the end of the scoring, the lens with the most points will be our overall winner. Starting with price, obviously the Yongnuo is going to pick up an early point here, as not only is it cheaper than the Viltrox, but for your money, you do get some nice extra features, including that customizable button, which I think all helps to make it such a good value for money option. So a point goes to the Yongnuo in this round. Build quality is next, and this one's a bit of a tough one. Although the Yongnuo is made of plastic, it doesn't feel badly built, and it does have a nice solid metal lens mount, but when you compare it directly to the Viltrox, which is entirely made of metal, it does feel a little bit cheap and plasticky, so I think in this round the point has to be awarded to the Viltrox. Handling is also another tough one, as both lenses are honestly a joy to use. However, I think the point has to go to the Yongnuo for a few reasons. Firstly, it's so small and lightweight, which just makes it so easy to pick up and shoot with, especially when mounted to my Sony a7 Mark III. You honestly hardly know it's even there. Secondly, the MF to AF switch and that customizable button that I keep banging on about just make it a lot more versatile, and it means that it can be adapted to just about any style of shooting. And finally, the focus ring. Now, I will admit I rarely use manual focus. However, the ring on the Yongnuo is just so silky smooth and responsive, whereas the Viltrox is very heavy to turn in comparison. So for video work, as I've kind of already mentioned, it feels like the Viltrox would be slightly frustrating to use, whereas the Yongnuo is clearly the nicer of the two. So after all of that, I think the point has to go to the Yongnuo. When it comes to image quality, the Viltrox wins hands down. It just offers a noticeable jump in sharpness when compared directly to the Yongnuo, so the Viltrox would be my worthy winner for this round. In the Bokeh balls test, it was a fairly close one yet again, but the Viltrox is the better option if you're looking for the roundest Bokeh balls possible. The final round is AF performance, and for me, I think the Viltrox deserves the point here too, but only just. Although the lenses are pretty much identical when it comes to video AF and also AF speed in good and bad lighting, the fact that the Yongnuo was less consistent when it came to testing out in the field and would occasionally front focus, for me, it's enough of a sin for it to just lose the point in this round. When shooting wide open, especially at f1.8, it's so important that the lens you use is able to focus consistently. There is nothing more frustrating than looking back through your images and being disappointed that half of them are just not pin sharp. So at the end of scoring, we can see that the clear winner of this Battle of the Budget is the Viltrox 85mm f1.8 STM Mark II. This lens is not only very well built, but also offers surprisingly good image quality and has a reliable AF system, all for less than $400, which is pretty damn impressive. If you're interested to see how this lens would handle against the likes of, oh, I don't know, the Sony 85mm f1.8, well, you're in luck, because last year we pitched the Viltrox against said lens, which I know is a big fan favorite of many Sony shooters, so don't miss out on that one, as the results may surprise you. So what do you think of the results? Do you think I've come to the right conclusion here, or will you actually be buying the Yongnuo anyway? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, as I always love to see what you guys have to say about these lens tests, especially when they're so closely fought like this one was. Before you go, remember to give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as I release new videos just like this every single week. So I look forward to seeing you all again next time.